This video is going to show you how to do part 2 of assignment 2, which is paragraph titles and literary form labeling. So the first thing that you need to do is review your literary toolbox. So this is the literary toolbox for Jonah, and you can see all of the forms here that are suggested. History and prayer both have asterisks on them. So what you're going to do is you're going to review what you're looking for here. In this case of the book of Jonah, I know I'm really going to focus in on history, which includes setting, characters, watching the plot, and then also looking for stylistic elements. So I've reviewed my literary forms. I know as I'm looking through, I'm going to be looking for plot. I'm also going to be looking for any change in the narrative to poetry. Then I'm going to do paragraph title. So paragraph title, you skim through each paragraph and then you come up with a 4-word title with words from the text that label it. As I'm doing this whole process, I'm really looking for structure. I'm asking myself, how did the author fit together these paragraphs? Do certain paragraphs fit into larger chunks of information? So I'm going to go ahead and walk through and show you how I do that. So as I skim through, here's the first paragraph. So now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa, found a ship, away from the presence of the Lord. So I think with the paragraph title, you're really looking for what is going on. And I think I want to definitely show that God is telling him to go to Nineveh. So I'm going to say, go Nineveh. But Jonah flees. So my paragraph title there is go Nineveh, and then Jonah flees. So I'm going to continue reading, skimming through. Okay, but the Lord hurled a great wind. The ship's starting to break up. Mariners were afraid. Jonah had gone down to the inner sleep. So the captain came and said to him, "What do you mean you sleep?" Okay. So basically God sends a storm and then Jonah is asleep. So I want to show that. So I'm going to say, Lord, and then you can use, so I'm going to do a little arrow, tempest, and then Jonah sleep. So notice how obviously I could say storm, but I'm using tempest because that's what's in the text. It's a good discipline to use words from the text. So moving on, and they said to one another, "Come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this evil may come upon us." So they cast lots. And Jonah saying who he is, and the man were exceedingly afraid, said, "What is this you have done?" For the men knew he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord. So I think on that one, there's dialogue there. I think it shows, things are heating up. They cast lots and it falls on Jonah. So I'm going to do cast lots and then an arrow to Jonah. Moving on, then they said to him, "What shall we do to us? This great sea died down." He said, "Pick me up, hurl me into the sea." Nevertheless, so then the men start rowing harder. Therefore they called out to the Lord, "O Lord, let us not perish, this man's life." So, wow, they're calling out to the Lord. Then they picked up Jonah and hurled him in the sea. And then the sea ceased its raging. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord. Okay, so I'm on the paragraph title down here. So I think I want to show that Jonah gets thrown into the sea, and then I also want to show this thing of like the men come to the Lord. So I'm going to do, how about Jonah? I'm going to use the arrow again, sea, and then men sacrifice. So all the while, let's just talk about plot. So as I'm doing these paragraph titles, I'm noticing this is all telling the same story. So it starts off, I would say, okay, this is the opening of the story. And then, plot, it includes, opening, conflict, rising intensity. So I think the conflict is that he's running. So I'm just going to write that, conflict, running. And I just notice it's really building intensity. So I'm just going to kind of like show arrow and just do rising intensity. So this is me, this is an example of me observing the literary form of history, which takes shape in setting, characters, plot. I know that here Jonah it's basically Jonah and the mariners. So it's also helpful to say, okay, so all of chapter 1, essentially the setting, so I'm writing setting, is basically in the boat. And then the characters, primarily Jonah and mariners. So I'm noting that. All right, so moving on to chapter 2. Okay, so those are all the paragraphs for chapter 1. And I'm pausing here to show you how I would kind of go back through and do forms as I'm doing paragraph titles. But now I'm going to jump back into paragraph titles. I still have to title this little guy. So this one says, "And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights." So I want to do Lord appointed fish because I like that word appointed. I already noticed that it was kind of repeated. So I'm going to underline that. In my first read through, I noticed that the word appointed was repeated. Okay, then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, saying, and then it launches off. So I'll just do Jonah prayed from belly. And then it's this long prayer. So what I notice here is obviously shift in the author's thought. So, because I'm paying attention to setting. So the setting of all of chapter 1 is in the boat. Now the setting shifts right here. So I'm going to say, okay, setting is in the fish, or in the belly of the fish. Note that it's not whale, it's fish. So then this, you can even just see how it's different. So this would be a prayer. So I'm going to mark this as prayer. That's what it initially looks like to me. But also it actually is there's different types of prayers. So it's actually a prayer of thanksgiving. So I noticed that I'm supposed to look at that here on this little thing. So I noted prayer of thanksgiving. I would also title this. So this is one big thing, but I think the main thing is called out, he answered. So this is a great example of, it doesn't have to be a perfect paragraph title, but something that just reflects it. So this is a prayer. Obviously there's a lot of elements in there, but called out, he answered really shows what's happening there of Jonah calling out to God. So I could continue on. And the Lord spoke to the fish and it vomited out. So I'm going to do Lord spoke, fish vomited. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city." So it kind of seems here, I definitely noticed a shift in the author's thought up here, mainly because it's a different setting. Then I see here, it changes the setting again. So I'm making a little mark in my text because I think, okay, this actually might be the structure of the book. We have so far, chapter 1 is in the boat, chapter 2 is in the belly of the fish, and then I see chapter 3 is now going to be in Nineveh. So the setting is in Nineveh. I could, I would continue on in my paragraph titles there. But what I want to show you, so imagine I'm going through my paragraph titles. I would also notice here that in chapter 4, you also get a shift. So it's Jonah's response to God, Nineveh repenting, and then God relenting. So it seems like it shifts here because this is going into a dialogue between God and Jonah. Then it says here, Jonah went, so starting chapter 4, verse 5, Jonah went out of the city and sat east of the city. So actually, I'm like, okay, kind of a shift of thought here, but also this is technically where the setting shifts. So I'm going to do setting outside the city. So feel like I got a pretty good grasp on my structural reading. Hypothetically, I've done all my paragraph titles. I've noted some of the key things of like setting, characters, looking for my forms. And I think I can safely say, I think I have a grasp on what the author's doing and how he arranged his material. So chapter 1 is in the boat, and that's a whole dialogue between Jonah and the mariners. So that is definitely one thing of, unit of thought. Then chapter 2 is Jonah in the whale. I can very easily see that. The literature type changes. It's primarily a prayer of thanksgiving. The location is in the belly of the fish. And then I have 2 more scenes. So one scene is Jonah in the city giving his message and Nineveh repenting. And then the last scene is outside the city. So this is awesome. I think I am definitely ready to move on to the next step, which is the book outline with an idea of how the author structured his material.